Hey, folks, we are back at NG Atlanta. Before I talk to Alyssa, which I do every week, I do want to shout out quickly about Progress. Progress paid my way out here. You know a little bit about them, right?
Oh, a little bit. Yeah, they just hired me. So
Yeah.
I'm their new Angular developer advocate for the Kendo UI team. So
Awesome.
they actually reached out to me and they're like, do you know this Chuck guy? And I was like, Chuck's legit. So
Awesome. Well, there we go. Celebrity endorsement right here. So Kendo UI is kind of what they're promoting through this. So if you're looking for all of those nice controls for your website, go check them out. I think my favorite one is like the table spreadsheet kind of.
The grid one?
Yeah. It's super nice.
Well, I actually just did a webinar. It was like literally the day before I drove here about like the accessibility, because they just added all this accessibility stuff. And so I was like testing it with like the screen reader and stuff, because I don't know, I go crazy for that. So yeah, the grid is pretty cool and they're always adding new features. So.
Yep. And I know they just added React controls or React components.
And I think there's like Vue ones too, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm like, anything non-Angular, I'm like,
Yeah, they have both. So
yeah.
Yeah, in fact, Tara will probably be in here a little bit later. And
yes.
She is going to be one of the panelists on the new React podcast. So.
I heard. I'm so pumped for that.
Yeah, so it'll be fun. But anyway, we're here to talk about Angular and cows and service workers and all that good stuff.
And the service workers, yes.
Yeah. So I think most people, when they hear about service workers, it's either like this pie in the sky thing, oh, I'll do work over there, or they hear it when they're looking at like progressive web apps and stuff, and that comes up right there, right? So are people really using service workers with their Angular apps?
So from what I heard, because I talked to like Steven and Brad and Pascal and a couple other people who are, I don't know, like forerunners in the service worker talk scene. And no, not really. They're not. Angular's not requiring them by default. And I guess like that's a smart move. And as Steven will say time and time again, they don't want to break developer expectations.
Right.
And so I understand that. But at the same time, the reason that inspired this entire talk was because I moved recently, like 2 months ago, from Orlando to Oklahoma. And we moved to 6 megabit internet speed. And it's like, woohoo! Like that would be like at the peak, right? Like, and so having experienced that, I actually did notice websites that were using service workers. Like it was painfully obvious when they weren't actually. And so
oh really?
And so that's when I was like, you know what, I need to do this. Like I've heard time and time again at talks or on blog posts that it's easy, like it's like a flip of the switch.
Yep.
I was like, so I'm gonna see how easy it is. And so in my talk I kind of walked through that process. I used NgDoc.io to upgrade, or not upgrade, but to go ahead and include service workers. And there were some bumps along the way. For instance, like I've been developing like AngularJS for a long time and then Angular recently, and I'd never ever used like ngBuild. And so whenever I was reading about how you can't use ngserve with production workers because you only want to have them running in production mode, I was like, but why? Right? Like, and so you have to use an HTTP server and all this extra stuff that came with it. And so it was a really fun learning experience, and it wasn't as hard. I think honestly, a lot of people who are more experienced in Angular are gonna be like, like it's nothing, right? Because they've used things like HTTP servers before, or they have used ngBuild before. So it's nothing new to them. And honestly, it's just a couple of like throw in config file and things like that, that for me at least, I'm not in a third world country right now, but it would make a difference. And so I think, I don't really see the downsides. I think it's just like a 10 to 30 minute thing, depending on how into Angular you are right now. But yeah, I think that's what I try to do, is just inspire people to give it a go, because just living with 6 megabit internet at its best. I had a like network test screenshot. I think it was at, what was it at? Like 21, like 40 kilobits.
Ooh,
it was like
you're cruising
worse than dial up. And I was just like, and that's what we were living at, right? Like, and so I was just like, this is the middle of America, right? Like, and people are, and I guess I just got into this mentality that everybody was, I don't know, it just wasn't something I thought about, honestly. Like network and it being an issue, and having network even, because there were times where we'd be driving and it's just like all of a sudden, like there's no cell network, so you can't even tether, right? Like, because I'm just so used to like driving around the city and popping into a coffee shop. If they don't have Wi-Fi, I'm gonna go ahead and tether, right? Like who cares? Because it's just so accessible. But yeah, so I think I'm hoping I inspired a couple people at least to just give it a go, because it wasn't that difficult for me, and I'm like, as newbie as it gets. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. So.
Right. I guess I'm wondering a little bit too on the end of like, so I hook up a service worker. Does Angular just, once it's there, automatically push work to it?
So yeah, that was the cool part. There was 2 magical moments that I talked about in my talk. And magical moments like the light bulb moment when I was like, oh wow, this is really cool. And the first one was when I was walking through the steps and I included it. I put the config file in, I built it, went to dist and started the HTTP server. And by default, it has like certain things in the assets folder, like just caching. And so there were things when I clicked the offline mode, like the logos, the buttons, the fonts, the colors, like all that stuff in the header and the side panel, they just showed up and they looked correct. And the only thing I was missing was like actual data, like the articles for NgDoc. If you've ever been there, there's like article lists and then there's a tag list that you can filter by. Those 2 buds were the only things that were missing. And I was just like jaw dropped because I was like, this is by default. This is with me literally copy pasting like a config file. And I was just like, oh, wow. And so that was me realizing what they meant by like, there's so much that it comes with, like that it's just out of the box. And so that was number 1. And then number 2 was once I went in and I added, because I just kept scrolling through the docs and learning, and I looked at a couple blog posts, but I added an asset group where I added a couple of custom URLs. One was to the articles, one was to tags, and there was, I told this is me like showing my cards on my noobishness. I was like, I didn't really know because Joe did all of the back end. I was front end 100%, but I tackled this because I wanted to learn about service workers. And so I didn't really know what routes I needed to like cache or what I needed to tell it, what URLs. And so I literally just opened up my dev tools, and whatever was red, like, and like, this isn't loading, like that's the URL I put in there. And then I rebuilt it, stopped the service or the HTTP server, rebuilt it, and then restarted it, and it was working and it was all there. And I was just like, well, I'm done. Like, that's it. And I was like, hey, Joe, how do I get this into production? Like,
nice.
it was really cool. And honestly, like for me, because like as I was going through, I was like taking notes or like making a GIF of me like typing out a certain thing so that I could, because I knew this was going to be a talk. Right. So it took me like an afternoon, but like that's why I'm thinking like 30 minutes if you're like super slow, because you're probably not going to be documenting the whole way. But yeah, I was really impressed that it worked so well. And I think one of the most painful parts was step number 1 when I had to install the service worker, because I got like errors immediately because I wasn't up to date on all my dependencies. And I actually called Mike, like Brocky, up on the phone, and I was like, so do I really like, because I was talking to my husband, he's Ember, right? And I was like, so is there like a command I can just run that'll like update all of these dependencies? And Mike was like, not yet, but I'm literally working on it right now. And so I was in the grocery store and I was like, shut up. Like, I was so excited. And the like grocer who was like bagging my stuff, like looked at me because I'm like on the phone screaming like, shut up, Mike. Like, so I'm really excited about that, because there's so many times like when you're after a certain goal, and all these like little things like bumps in the road will get in your way, and you're like, well, technically that's not really part of the setup process. I shouldn't have ran into that, but it was still painful, and it still happened to me, and I'm sure it happens to other people. So I'm excited about especially Ng update, because I think just not even service workers, but like anything, like, it's just gonna be so nice. Did you hear him talk about that?
So I've been in here doing the interviews.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I've been missing all the talks, but he came in this morning and we talked about it. Yeah. So that's I'm just so pumped about that one. I was like, can I use it? He's like, it's in beta. I'm like, does that mean I can use it? Yeah, exactly. You didn't say alpha. Yeah, absolutely. So you just hook it up. I mean, I guess you show people how to get started with it, like how to turn it on. Yeah,
there were like 7 steps total, but like in the beginning part, before you like to just see the default out of the box, I think there were 4, and it was literally like installing it, and then you have to like turn it on in the settings. You have to say like service worker true for production mode only, and then I think the next after that was the NgSW file. It's like the config file, right? And that there's lots of people who have them out there, and people are really like persnickety about their files. They're like, I was talking to Maxime, and he was like looking at my file trying to help me debug something, and he was like, well, you should try my config file. Like, they're really like, this is the good stuff, right? So just pick one. Like CLI has a boilerplate one, and then the Angular docs have one. I copied it off of the Angular docs and pasted it in, and then just run ngBuild. Have you ever like done ngBuild? I actually asked the audience that. I was like, how many of you have done ngBuild? Because I hadn't before I tried service workers, because I didn't need to. I didn't need to do anything in production mode. And so I was like, I mean, I let Joe handle that. I was like, you get it on the server. I'll make it look good.
Right.
And so, but yeah, have you ever done that before?
I've done it a couple of times on like toy apps.
Okay, so you've ran it, because I never even ran the command before. And it hit like 92%. And then it like stalled forever. It's like chunk asset optimization. And I was like, after like playing with this so much and like seeing that 92% so much, I like tweeted at Mike. I was like, fix it. Like, you know, like why is this so slow? And there were so many people that commented back. They were like, I think somebody was like hashtag like 92 for life or something, because like it's just the longest part. But but yeah, literally it's just after, so you've installed it, you've turned like it to true, and you have the config file, you just build, and you have to go into the dist folder, and that's how you serve it up in production.
Right.
And so have you ever used HTTP server?
HTTP server?
Yeah, it's like literally an NPM package, and the docs were like, yeah, just spin up an HTTP server, and I'm like, okay, yeah, just spin up an HTTP server, and like, but I'd never done it.
I can't say that I really have. No,
I like my friends in the Ruby community told me about like the Python simple server that like comes by default in Mac, and so like I had an alias for that, and I was just like, oh yeah, simple server. But they, all of the things we're talking about, this HTTP server, and you just have to install it off of NPM. But I just was like, I don't know, the way sometimes the docs read, it makes me feel like everyone knows about this but me. Like, do you ever get that feeling? I'm like, so everyone knows about this server but me. Because I tried using it. I was like, oh, it just says run it. So I tried running it, and it was like command not found. And I'm like, well, great. Like,
yeah. Oh, I love that.
You've been there then?
Oh, yeah. I think everybody has at some point where somebody just takes for granted that something's there that isn't there.
No, I think so. I think it's just people who are, I think sometimes people write the docs and they're just used to things. Yeah. They kind of write them like it's old news.
Their normal is everybody's normal, which isn't actually. Yeah.
But it's also hard to know where to set the bar for like what like, do we explain things all the way at 0, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so.
Well, and with a little bit of work, you can just go Google that. And,
and it was super. You're right. It was super easy to find, and I read up on it, and I was like, that's where I even found out about like the proxy that you can add and stuff. So it was super easy, but also like, don't be discouraged if you're reading through the docs and you're like, I've never used ngBuild. I don't know what an HTTP server is. What the heck is this config file that they're acting like is old news bear, right? Like, so I just don't be discouraged. I think there's a lot that you have to, when you're trying something new, you have to just kind of accept. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to be like, okay, it says it does that. I'm going to believe it for now and move on to step 2. And so, but because afterwards, that's when you see it kind of all come together. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that highlights just the way you're talking about this, you know, another thing that we see in the tech community where, you know, you talk about something and people just assume that you're an expert in all of it.
Oh
right?
my goodness, they do.
So, you know, and I get this with the podcast a lot, right?
Do
you? Know,
you?
Like, oh yeah. And it's funny because like with Angular, you know, I play with it, but like I haven't written a single page app in Angular, and it's just because I've never really felt the need, you know, I just sprinkle it in where I want it. But you know,
but people are like, please, Chuck, you are the Angular god. Tell us all.
Oh, I've had people ask me questions about routing in Angular, and I'm just like, I'm sure I could find you an answer.
Let me Google this real quick. But
my favorite is I was a host on an iOS podcast that I ran for 3 or 4 years.
Did people ask you iOS questions?
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. So how many apps have you built? I'm not really a mobile developer. And then I get that look like of consternation, but you're on the show. Yeah, I'm the guy that pushes the record button. So yeah, it happens.
So people have been there then. Yeah, they know.
But the other thing is you talk about something for an hour, you can do enough work to really understand it, and then our guests carry a lot of it. And so it's really easy to come in, somebody hears everything they needed to hear about a topic, and then it turns out that, the hosts, you know, we have a passing knowledge of it because we read up on it in order to prepare. We probably tried a few things, but not a lot of it really stuck around in our process.
There's just too many things to be an expert in, to like really have a deep dive. So that is why there are guests.
Try that on a general JavaScript podcast.
Oh, I know. I was like, and now you're doing a React one? Like, Chuck, dang.
Yeah, and a Vue one.
Oh, what? Oh, I forgot about that. Wait, okay. Is there a podcast you're not doing?
I'm not doing Python yet. Oh. I keep getting asked for that one now, so it'll probably come. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Dang,
but if I do Python, I've decided that we're way off.
We have rabbit trailed, but I'm fine with it.
That's fine. But if I do a Python one, I'm probably also going to do a machine learning one. Oh, because that's why I would learn Python.
With the Python one, or it was separate?
They'd be separate shows.
Okay. Well,
but yeah, I do one.
You're really going to get a lot of questions.
Yeah. But it's funny.
All the things.
Well, sometimes people just realize, he talks a lot more on the Ruby podcast than he does on the iOS podcast. But some people don't, and that's totally fine. But it's just a funny reality. And Amy Knight was in here. You and she were talking a lot about just most of my experience is AngularJS, or for the uninitiated, that's Angular 1.
But don't say that in public.
But anyway, you're still in the Angular community. You're at a conference. Most of the talks are around Angular, Angular 2+ related stuff.
Right.
And, people just assume that you're on the bandwagon with everybody else. And the reality is not so much, because we had a big thing that we had to upgrade, and it was a big process to go through to do it.
And that's one thing she was saying, is just she was really grateful that we were talking about AngularJS and the reasons that some people don't upgrade in that podcast. And I was just honest about how I was still at the time working on a really big AngularJS project with my company, and I think there's a lot of people out there in that boat. But like Joe explained to me, because I was like, well, why aren't we having AngularJS talks? It's because it's not new stuff, and so people aren't going to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars to get to a conference to see something that's 3 years old. And so I get that, but I also
they will if they're hurting for it.
That's true.
But there's already a lot of stuff out there that they can just find online.
A lot of resources. Oh yeah. So I think just don't be discouraged if you're still in that boat, because there's a lot of people still on AngularJS.
So I just want to bring this back around to cows.
Oh yes, the cows.
So did you tell cow stories or have cow pictures?
I had so many cow videos and gifts because both of our family, my husband's and mine, are in Oklahoma, and so my sister-in-law has a ranch, and they just got I think 100 cows out there, and we were there when the first baby was born, and so I have this video of me petting this little baby cow, and it's like a big cow puppy, it's like a soft puppy. I don't know if you've ever pet a cow calf, but it's
I have not pet any cow puppies.
Super soft, like a cow puppy, and so that was part of the moral of the story was that I've had a lot of fun being out in Oklahoma and getting to be with family and the cows and the critters and being out there in nature, but it just made me realize that there's a downfall, and without things like service workers, I wouldn't be able to survive, because I'm an internet child. You know what I mean? I couldn't do it. And so I think for me it just became all too personal. Because I was always people in Africa don't have internet. That's why service workers. But it wasn't. It's not just people in other countries that are having issues. There's a lot of places in the U.S. And I think it made me realize, because at the time I was still working on the AngularJS project too, and I was like, how many of my users, are not gonna see this load in 10 seconds, 20 seconds? Literally, I was so spoiled. It was if it was past 3 seconds, I was on to a new thing, right? I'm like, oh, this isn't loaded yet. Let's go check out Twitter or something.
The infamous Twitter threshold. And I totally know what you're talking about, because summer 2016, we took a trip out to Oklahoma. We were in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. And I would hike up to the top of the ridge twice a day just to make sure that nobody was trying to get a hold of me.
Yes. Yeah, I've been there. So, I've been in valleys where you have to hike up to get the signal. So
and then it was I think I'm connecting.
I know. That's kind of because like I would go, and once you finally reach civilization, you like get the other half of the messages or something. You're like, ooh, okay. Yeah. but I think it's just the moral of the story is like service workers, they're not that hard for developers to implement, but for some people they make a huge difference. So I think it's worth it to look into. At least look into, if not implement. So.
Well, now that we've talked about everything and service workers, we'll go ahead and wrap this video up. If you want to hear more of Alyssa, she is on Adventures in Angular every week, so come check us out. She's also on Angular Air most of the time, which is another resource. So if you're looking for good content, both of those are great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chuck.
Thank you.